It was a hot summer afternoon. The sun was high in the sky, and the roads were busy. People were rushing home after work. At a small gas station near the highway, a tall black man stepped out of his clean black SUV. He wore simple clothes, a plain black t-shirt, jeans, and sports shoes. He looked calm, focused, and peaceful. He pulled out his wallet, paid for the fuel, and started filling the tank. But someone was watching him. A police officer parked nearby in his patrol car. He was young, around 27 years old, and full of energy, but also full of ego. He looked at the man and didn't like what he saw. He didn't see a peaceful man. He didn't see a customer. He saw something else, someone suspicious. The officer slowly stepped out of his car and began walking toward the man. His hand was resting on his gun belt, and his eyes were sharp. The man looked up and saw him coming. He nodded politely, just like anyone would when a stranger approaches. But the officer didn't nod back. Instead, he shouted, "Hey, is this your car?" The man blinked. He stayed calm. "Yes, officer. It's my car." The officer didn't believe him. "You sure? You look like you don't belong in a car like this." The man was confused. He smiled a little. "I worked hard for it, sir. I promise." But the officer didn't smile. He stepped closer and looked inside the car through the window. Then he looked back at the man and said, "Let me see your ID and car papers, now." The man reached slowly into his pocket and pulled out his wallet. He handed over his ID without saying a word. The officer took it and looked at it for a few seconds, then frowned. "This ID looks fake," he said. The man raised his eyebrows. "It's not. You can check it." But the officer was not listening. He was already calling something on his radio. A few people at the gas station had started noticing what was happening. A woman in her car rolled down her window and began filming with her phone. Another man from inside the store looked out the glass window. The officer began to raise his voice. "I'm asking you simple questions and you're giving me attitude. That's not smart," he said. "I'm not giving attitude," the man replied, still calm. "I'm just answering you, sir." "Turn around," the officer said. "Put your hands behind your back." The man didn't move. "Officer, please, I think there's a misunderstanding." The officer stepped forward, pulled out his handcuffs, and grabbed the man's wrist. The man didn't resist, but he looked straight into the officer's eyes and said something quietly. "You're making a big mistake." The officer laughed. "Oh, yeah? You gonna tell me who you are now?" The man nodded. He took a deep breath. Then, in a calm, strong voice, he said, "I am a 4-star general in the United States Army." For a moment, everything went quiet. The officer paused. He looked confused. He looked at the man's face again, now more closely. Something had changed. The calmness was still there, but now there was power behind it. Dignity. Control. The officer laughed nervously. "Nice try," he said. "That's a funny joke." The man didn't laugh. He reached into his other pocket, slowly and carefully, and pulled out a military ID. He held it up. The officer looked at it but didn't take it. He didn't want to believe it. "This is fake," he said again. "I've seen fakes before." By now, more people were watching. The woman in the car was still recording. Another customer started whispering, "I think he's telling the truth." The man stood still, looking straight ahead. He said nothing more, but inside his heart was breaking, not because he was being disrespected, but because this wasn't the first time. This had happened before, in airports, in stores, on the street. People didn't see his medals, they didn't see his service, they only saw his skin. Just then, another police car arrived. A second officer stepped out. An older man with gray hair and years of experience in his eyes. He looked at the scene. Then he looked at the man, and suddenly his whole body changed. He stopped walking. He stood up straight, and then, in front of everyone, he saluted. "General," he said. "Sir," I apologize. The young officer froze. He looked at his partner, then at the man, then at the ID in his hand. The truth hit him like a rock. He had just disrespected a war hero, a leader, a man who had served his country for over 30 years. People around the gas station began to speak. Did he just say, "General"? "Oh my God," the woman in the car whispered. "This is going online. The world needs to see this." But the general didn't raise his voice. He didn't shout. He just said 4 words. "Please, treat people better." And then he turned away and walked back to his car. But his words stayed in the air like fire. The officer wanted to say something, but it was too late. The damage was done. Long before he became a 4-star general, long before people saluted him, he was just a boy, a young black boy with big dreams and no easy path. His name was David Johnson. Born in a small, poor neighborhood in Alabama, David's life was never easy. His mother worked 2 jobs, one at a diner during the day and another cleaning offices at night. His father had left when David was just 5, so it was just him and his mother, struggling to survive. They lived in a tiny 2-room apartment. Sometimes the lights would go off because the bill wasn't paid. Sometimes they shared one meal between them. But even in those dark days, his mother always said one thing: "David, you are not poor. You are powerful. You just have to believe it." David believed her. He had no fancy shoes, no new clothes, but he had big dreams. While other kids played outside, David sat in the local library reading books about soldiers, leaders, and the army. He was fascinated by discipline, by honor, by courage. In school, he was quiet. He didn't talk much. Some kids laughed at his old clothes. Some teachers ignored him. But David didn't care. He studied hard. He always sat in the front row. He listened more than he spoke, but life wasn't fair. One day in high school, David saw something that changed him forever. He was walking home when he saw 2 police officers stop his friend, a black teen just like him. They pushed him, shouted at him, and made him lie down in the dirt, just because he was wearing a hoodie and walking alone. David stood frozen. He felt something rise inside him: pain, anger, and confusion. That night, he told his mother, "I want to join the army. I want to be someone. I want to wear a uniform and be respected." His mother hugged him tightly. She was scared. The army was dangerous, but she saw the fire in his eyes. "Then go, David," she said. "But don't just wear the uniform. Earn it. Make it mean something." At age 18, David joined the U.S. Army. The Army life begins basic training was hard, really hard. Early mornings, heavy drills, yelling officers, cold nights, painful days. Many gave up, but David didn't. He kept going. Every time someone said he wouldn't make it, he trained harder. When others rested, he practiced. When others complained, he stayed quiet. Some officers looked down on him. Some soldiers ignored him. But David kept rising, one step at a time. He learned to fight. He learned to lead. He learned to carry weight, both on his back and in his heart. Within a few years, he became a sergeant, then a lieutenant, then a captain. Every step of the way, people tried to stop him, but he kept proving them wrong. The medal no one saw. On one mission overseas, his team was caught in an ambush, bullets flying, smoke in the air. His captain was hit. Soldiers were panicking. David stepped up. He dragged the captain to safety. He directed his team. He saved lives that day. Later, the captain, lying in the hospital, said these words: "That man should be a general one day." But when David returned home, there was no parade, no news coverage, no headlines. Because, sometimes, heroes don't look the way people expect. More than a uniform years passed. David climbed higher in the ranks. But he never forgot where he came from. He visited schools. He helped poor families. He spoke to young black boys and told them, "You are not weak. You are not small. You are strong. You are powerful." People began calling him the Silent Lion, strong, calm, fierce, but humble. At age 45, he became one of the youngest black men in U.S. history to earn 4 stars on his shoulder. But even then, he still faced disrespect. In restaurants, in airports, on sidewalks. People didn't always see the stars. They only saw his skin. Back to the present now, standing at the gas station, with a young cop doubting his identity, David felt all those years come back. The long road, the quiet nights, the fight for respect, and still, he didn't raise his voice. Still, he didn't show anger, because he had learned something. Real power doesn't scream. Real power stands tall and speaks when it's needed most. The world didn't give David Johnson anything easily, even inside the military, where everyone wore the same uniform. Not everyone was treated the same. When David became a lieutenant, some older officers didn't like it. They whispered behind his back. They asked, did he get promoted just because they needed more diversity? David heard it all. But he said nothing. He believed in action, not arguments. Instead of fighting back with words, he showed his worth with hard work. He stayed, late after training. He memorized every rule in the Army book. He took care of his soldiers like a big brother. When others rested, he worked. When others laughed, he studied. One soldier once said, "If you get stuck in a battlefield, you want David Johnson beside you. That man doesn't quit." Toughest mission. Yet in his 10th year of service, David was sent to a war zone overseas. It was the most dangerous mission of his career. His team had to rescue American citizens trapped behind enemy lines. The situation was tense. One wrong move, and they'd all be dead. But David didn't panic. He made a plan, trained his men, and led the mission himself. On a rainy night, under heavy gunfire, David moved forward while others stayed back. He guided his team through mud, smoke, and fear. They saved 13 lives that night. He didn't speak about it. He didn't post pictures. He just came home quietly. His commander gave him a medal, but David said, "I don't fight for medals. I fight for my people." Still not enough. Even after saving lives and earning medals, David still faced racism. One day, during an official dinner with senior officers, a general mistook him for a waiter and asked for water. David looked him in the eyes and gently said, "Sir, I'm here to speak, not serve." The general was shocked, but David didn't complain. He didn't get angry, he just kept moving forward, because David knew his journey was not just for him. It was for every young boy who looked like him and felt unseen. Mentor and leader as. He rose through the ranks. David became a mentor. He helped young black soldiers find their strength. He trained them with patience. He protected them when others tried to push them down. He was known as a quiet leader, someone who didn't yell, but when he spoke, the whole room listened. One soldier once said, "He doesn't just teach you how to fight. He teaches you how to stand tall." At age 45, David stood in front of a full military base. He was being honored with his 4th star, the highest rank he could achieve. The crowd clapped. Flags flew high. His mother, now old and weak, sat in the front row, tears in her eyes. He walked up to her, kneeled, and whispered, "I earned it. For you." But even generals get judged, even with 4 stars. David still couldn't hide from racism. He wore a uniform at work, but when he wore plain clothes in public, people treated him differently. Some followed him in stores. Some crossed the road to avoid him. He never complained, but he never forgot either. He knew. Respect in the Army is earned, but in the outside world, sometimes it's still denied. Back to the gas station now. Back at the gas station. Standing beside his SUV, a young white officer had just called his ID fake. A camera was recording. A second officer had just saluted him. The truth was out. David stood still, calm, proud, and silent. And yet a deep pain sat quietly in his heart, because this was the same pain he had felt as a boy. The same pain he carried through every mission, the pain of being doubted, even after giving everything to his country. But still, he forgave, because that's what true leaders do. David Johnson never dreamed of fame. He never chased power. He only wanted one thing: to serve with honor. And with every passing year in the military, he did just that. People began to notice him, not because he talked loud, not because he acted tough, but because he stood tall, quietly, with strength and grace. He became the kind of leader others trusted, even in the darkest times. Mission after mission, David led missions in dangerous lands, deserts, jungles, cities under fire. Each time, his team came back alive. Each time, he put their safety before his own. One mission changed everything. His unit was sent to rescue hostages from a war-torn building. The plan failed. Enemies surrounded them. Ammunition was low. Backup was hours away. His soldiers looked at him, scared, tired, bleeding. David didn't blink. He said one sentence: "We don't break. We move together." And that's what they did. He led them out through fire and fear. Every man came home. He didn't talk about it. He didn't post photos. He just hugged his men and returned to duty. That night, a young soldier wrote in his diary, "General Johnson didn't just save our lives. He saved our hope." The 4-star. Years passed. More missions, more medals, more respect. And then, the day came. David was invited to Washington, D.C. to stand in front of the nation's top leaders. His name was called David L. Johnson, promoted to General United States Army. As he walked onto the stage, the crowd stood and clapped, not for his rank, but for his journey. He stood proud, wearing his new uniform, 4 stars on each shoulder. It was not just metal. It was memory. It was pain, sacrifice, loyalty, and love for his country. His mother was there, now in a wheelchair but smiling with pride. David walked to her, knelt down, and whispered, "These stars are yours too." She held his hand, her eyes full of tears. My son, the little boy who never gave up, a leader. Beyond the battlefield, after becoming a 4-star general, David could have sat back. He could have enjoyed the power, the position, but he didn't. He spent his free time visiting schools, talking to kids, especially black and brown kids who didn't see many leaders who looked like them. He told them, "Your skin is not a weakness. It's a crown. Walk with pride." He also fought inside the system, pushing for fair treatment, respect, and equal opportunity in the military. Many admired him, some feared him, but everyone respected him. The interview that touched millions won. Day, a journalist asked him, "General Johnson, after everything you've done, what's your proudest moment?" He smiled, thought for a second, and said, "Every time a young soldier looks at me and thinks, if he can do it, maybe I can too. That's my real medal." That answer went viral. Millions watched it. Some cried, some felt hope for the first time in a long time, but even greatness can't hide you even after all this. Even with the highest rank, even after risking his life for his country, David was still not safe from judgment. He knew it. He lived with it. So he stayed humble. He stayed ready. And that's why, when that young cop disrespected him at the gas station, he wasn't shocked. He was heartbroken, because deep down he had always known. The fight for respect isn't won by stars, but by hearts. Back at the gas station, The sun was now lower in the sky. Shadows stretched across the pavement. The air was still, but the situation was heating up. General David Johnson stood calmly beside his black SUV, hands slightly raised. His military ID was in one hand. The young cop stared at it, still refusing to believe what he was seeing. He kept shaking his head. "No way," the cop muttered. "This is fake. I know it's fake. You don't look like no general." His voice was louder now, nervous, angry. People were watching. A few had started recording. One woman whispered to her child, "Stay quiet. Don't look. Something's wrong here." David didn't move. He didn't raise his voice. But his eyes, his calm, deep eyes, stared straight into the officer's. And then, the officer made a decision. He stepped forward. "Turn around," he shouted. "Put your hands on the car. Now!" David took a deep breath. He didn't resist. He placed his hands on the car, slow and steady. The officer pulled out his handcuffs. The crowd gasped. A young man shouted from across the gas station, "Hey! What are you doing? He didn't do anything!" The officer turned. "Mind your business!" More people gathered. Some were confused, some were angry, but no one moved. They just watched. David spoke, finally, voice calm but strong. "Officer, if you arrest me now, you'll regret this for the rest of your life." The officer paused. And just then, the sound of another police siren filled the air. A second police car pulled in fast. It stopped. The door opened. Out stepped a senior officer, older, more experienced. A few gray hairs peeked under his cap. He looked serious but calm. He looked at the young officer, then at the man standing by the car. And the moment he saw David's face, his expression changed completely. He froze. Then, like a soldier reporting to duty, he stood straight and raised his hand in a sharp salute. "General Johnson." "Sir, I'm so sorry." The gas station went quiet. The young cop turned his head fast. "Wait, what? Sir, you know him?" The older officer nodded slowly. "Everyone in this department knows him. He's a 4-star general and a hero." The young officer took a step back. He looked at David again, this time really seeing him, not as a threat, not as a suspect, but as a man who had given everything to protect this country. His hands started shaking. I didn't know." David turned to face him, eyes calm. "No, officer," he said softly. "You didn't care to know. The power of truth." One of the bystanders, still holding her phone, whispered, "He really is a general." Another person added, "They were about to arrest a national hero." The young cop stood frozen. His heart was racing. His face turned red with shame. He looked at the ID again, now realizing it was real. Every part of it. The stars, the name, the honor, all real. And yet, he had judged the man by his skin, not by his story. David's words, David didn't shout. He didn't demand revenge. He just looked the officer in the eye and said, "The next time you stop someone like me, ask more questions. Talk less. Listen more." The older officer stepped in. "Sir, please, we'll handle this. I promise." David nodded once. He turned, opened his car door, and sat down quietly. But before driving off, he rolled down the window, looked at the young officer one last time, and said, "It's not your badge that gives you power. It's how you treat people." Then, without another word, he drove away. The next morning, the world changed. The gas station video was now everywhere. A young woman had uploaded the clip online with the caption, "Cop disrespects black man at gas station, then learns he's a 4-star general." In just a few hours, it went viral. Millions of views, thousands of comments. News channels, social media pages, and influencers began sharing it. People were shocked. Some couldn't believe what they saw. A calm, humble man, being treated like a criminal, only to find out he was a decorated war hero. People Speak Out 1. Comment read, "If this can happen to a 4-star general, imagine what happens to the rest of us." Another said, "He stayed calm. With that much power and respect, he still chose peace over pride." Others were angry. Why didn't the officer ask questions first? Is a skin color still more powerful than a military rank? David. Johnson's name was now trending across the country. Some people cried watching the video. Some watched it over and over, shocked by his patience. And the officer's mistake. News interviews and headlines news reporters rushed to cover the story. General David Johnson speaks out after viral gas station incident. A war hero disrespected, but still shows grace. Why did it take a uniform for people to respect him? Everyone wanted to hear from him, but David remained quiet. He didn't post. He didn't rant. He didn't blame. Instead, he released one short message to the public. It's not about me. It's about the millions of others who face this treatment, without cameras to protect them. That one sentence hit the nation hard. The officer's regret. The young cop who had stopped David also became a topic of discussion. He was suspended from duty for investigation. He apologized in a statement. "I made a terrible mistake. I judged someone by appearance, not by truth. I am deeply sorry." But many were not ready to forgive. Some said, "Sorry isn't enough. What if there was no second officer? What if there was no video?" David never asked for punishment. He didn't call for the officer to be fired. Instead, he requested something else. Let him learn. Let him train. Let him talk to people like me. Let him see what he never saw before. A nation reflects across the country. Conversations began. In schools, in offices, in homes, people were talking about racism, respect, and the silent pain many carry every day. Young black men shared their own stories. Veterans came forward too, saying how they were saluted in uniform, but ignored in plain clothes. One elderly veteran said on live TV, "We fought for this country, but we're still fighting for dignity." A message of hope. Through it all, David remained strong, silent, and steady. Just like always, he appeared on one talk show, not to defend himself, but to teach. The host asked, "General Johnson, how did you stay so calm?" David smiled softly and said, "Because if I had shouted, he would have feared me more. If I had fought back, I would have become the criminal in their eyes. So I stood still, not for myself, but for every young boy watching me." The world had seen the truth, but now it was time to feel it. Days after the video went viral, people weren't just talking. They were reflecting. From big cities to small towns, emotions were high. In barber shops and coffee shops, on buses, and in classrooms, people asked the same question. Why did this happen to him? The public's pain people of color shared their stories. A young boy posted a video saying, "I'm just 13, but I'm scared. What if this happens to me?" A mother cried in an interview, "My son wants to join the army like General Johnson, but now I'm afraid. Will the world still see him as a threat?" Even people who had never spoken about racism before began to speak out. A white teacher posted, "I used to think racism was in the past. Now I know. It's still alive, and it's quiet, but deadly." The story touched hearts, not just minds. The officer breaks down. The young officer who had disrespected David stayed silent for days. He turned off his phone. He didn't eat. He didn't sleep. Then one morning, he showed up at his police station, not in uniform, but in a plain white shirt. He asked to speak. Cameras recorded as he stood before a press conference, eyes red, hands shaking. He said, "I failed. Not just as a police officer, but as a human being. I didn't see a man, I saw a color, and I'll carry that shame forever." He paused, wiped a tear, and added, "General Johnson, if you're watching this, I'm sorry. You gave everything. For this country, I couldn't even give you basic respect." Some people were still angry, but others saw something rare, true regret. David's quiet. Grace David never spoke badly of the officer. He didn't post angry videos. He didn't demand punishment. He didn't call for revenge. Instead, he made a private visit to the police station. No cameras, no crowd, just one quiet meeting between a general and a young man who had made a terrible mistake. No one knows what David said that day. But when the officer walked out, he was crying. And David was calm as always. One person from the station shared later, "The general didn't speak with anger. He spoke like a father, like a teacher. He didn't break the young man, he helped him understand." A nation moves across the country, police departments began new training programs. Respect before reaction became a slogan. More officers were taught about bias, judgment, and empathy. David was invited to speak at a national leadership event. His speech was short, only 5 minutes. But no one forgot it. He ended with this: "Uniforms don't make us better than others. They remind us to protect others, no matter who they are." The crowd gave him a standing ovation, not because he shouted, but because he stood with grace. The world looks differently. Now, murals of David Johnson began appearing on city walls. One painting showed him standing in uniform, surrounded by children of all races holding flags. Another showed him in plain clothes with the words, "Respect is not worn, it's earned." He didn't ask for this attention, but he accepted it with humility, because he knew the message was bigger than him. Weeks had passed since the gas station incident, but the world hadn't forgotten. People still talked about it in their homes, at schools, in police academies, and in town meetings. The video had become a symbol, not just of racism, but of grace, forgiveness, and power without pride. General David Johnson had stayed silent most of the time, but now he was ready to speak. One last time. A national broadcast, he was invited to speak at a special televised event, Voices of Change, where leaders from across the country came to talk about justice, unity, and hope. David stood on a quiet stage. No loud music, no spotlights. Just one man, in a simple black suit, no uniform, no medals, just him. And when he began to speak, the world listened. David's speech, he looked into the camera and said, "I've worn a uniform for over 30 years. I've led men into battle. I've buried soldiers who gave their lives for this country. And still, at a gas station in my own country, I wasn't seen as a hero. I was seen as a threat." He paused. His voice was steady, not angry, not weak. "That moment wasn't new to me. I've been followed in stores, ignored in rooms, judged by faces that didn't know my name. But what hurt most wasn't the disrespect. It was the silence of those who saw it and said, nothing." The audience was silent, eyes fixed on him. "I'm not here to punish. I'm here to remind. We don't need to be perfect, and we just need to be better. Don't wait for someone to wear stars before you treat them like they matter. Respect isn't earned by rank. It's given by heart." He ended with one final line, the one that would be remembered forever. The real strength of a country is how it treats the people who have nothing to prove. A lasting legacy. After his speech, there was silence, then tears, then a standing ovation. Even people watching from home stood up. That night, the world didn't just see a general, they saw a teacher, a father figure, a man of quiet fire. Where he is, now David Johnson returned to a quieter life. No press, no attention. He spends time mentoring young soldiers. He visits schools. He writes letters to boys in troubled neighborhoods, telling them, "You matter. Don't let the world decide your worth. You are powerful." He walks freely in plain clothes, head high, spirit unshaken, because now, even without a uniform, people know who he is, not just by name, but by heart. Final scene, narration ending. Sometimes it takes one painful moment to wake up a sleeping world. But when that moment is met with grace instead of hate, it becomes more than a story. It becomes a lesson that lives forever. Fade out. Music swells. Title card. Inspired by true events. Share if you believe in quiet strength.